So this is why it's important to do maintenance on your solar water heaters in Florida. Usually heaters in Florida, especially South and Central Florida, are open loop types, meaning that the same water that's in the panel is the water that comes out of your tap. There's no heat exchangers or anything. Really efficient, but the downside is all the minerals in the water react with the anode rod in the tank, and I don't know if that's showing up on camera, but you see the little pieces of solid material there shooting out of the hose. That is all anode salts. Kind of see some of it right here. See these little chunks? And that's actually a bit of boiler scale right there. This camera's not wanting to focus for some reason. There we go. So that's calcium carbonate. And this blue-green stuff you're seeing is a magnesium salt from the magnesium sacrificial anode inside the tank. So this stuff here, combined with calcium carbonate, both of those solids will clog up the pump or your freeze valve and cause problems. So it's very important to drain the water heater yearly, especially right before winter when the freeze valve might need to open up for a cold snap. Yeah, the other thing a lot of people neglect is changing the anode rod, which is actually what we're doing today. The anode rod, which is pretty much in all steel tank water heaters, including solar water heaters, it's basically like a sacrificial anode on a boat. It's made of magnesium, and unfortunately I don't have better light with me because my battery's low on my phone. But there's this little plug in the top of the tank, a little hex head plug, and that's actually a rod that goes all the way down the tank. And basically what that rod does is it absorbs all the corrosion that would normally attack the steel tank. So here's one. So basically that little hex head plug that you're seeing in the top of the tank, or you would see if I had better lighting in there, is actually a rod that goes all the way down into the tank, and that rod corrodes. It starts off like this when you put it in the tank, but after a while it becomes this stuff here, this blue-green salt, after reacting with the minerals in the water. And the purpose of that is to keep the tank from corroding. So this thing corrodes, this rod corrodes, so that the tank does not. However, once all this metal has been converted to that blue-green salt that you see there, it starts to corrode the tank. Water, that is, it starts to corrode the tank. So you need to change that anode. And actually, contrary to popular belief, a water softener does not stop that process. It actually accelerates it. So I always tell my clients, if you have a water softener, you actually want to replace your anode rod more frequently. Typically here in Central Florida, the well water is pretty decent. So if you're on well water and it's not being softened, it's just coming straight out of the ground, I usually recommend going between 4 and 5 years. And I mean, it's going to vary depending on how much water is running through that tank, but generally speaking, if you're on well water, I've found that every 4 to 5 years is sufficient. If you're on city water or county water, probably better off at about 3 to 4. And if you're on a water softener, whether it's coming out of a well or city water, then you probably want to do 2 to 3 year intervals on your anode changes. And if you do the anode change yourself, you can tell if the you can tell the condition of the anode when you pull it out. If you go to bend it and everything flakes off and there's nothing but a tiny little wire left, then that means you waited too long. No metal is left. Ideally, when you pull the anode out, you want to at least see some magnesium or aluminum metal left on that anode. That means the corrosion never got to the tank. It was still attacking the anode rod. Whenever you pull an anode out and you bash it on the ground and all the flaky stuff comes off, and there's nothing left but the steel wire that runs down the center, then that means you waited too long and your tank has already suffered some corrosion. And that's pretty much true of all steel tanked water heater, whether it's gas, electric, solar, heat pump, whatever. If it's got a steel tank, 99% of them have one of these sacrificial anodes. The only exception is really nice tanks like commercial water heaters. They typically have a powered anode, and those don't degrade over time. Those don't need to be changed, but that's pretty much the exception rather than the rule. You can almost guarantee if you have a steel tanked water heater, which 99% of them are, you need to change that anode. See if I can get some video here after we've changed the anode out. That way you guys can kind of see what the old one looks like versus the new one.